The power of perception is one of the most underestimated forces in our lives. Every single day, people are judged not by their true abilities, but by how they appear, how they act, or how they are assumed to be. Perception creates invisible walls that separate individuals into categories: strong or weak, capable or incapable, worthy or unworthy. And once that perception is set in someone's mind, it can dictate how they treat you, how they talk to you, and even how they decide your opportunities before you've even spoken a word. When someone is seen as powerless, society often dismisses them instantly, stripping them of respect without even considering the possibility that what they see might not be the whole truth. What makes perception so powerful is that it doesn't need evidence to exist. It thrives on assumptions, stereotypes, and quick judgments. A person could walk into a room with worn-out clothes, and instantly, in the eyes of many, they lose credibility. Another person could walk in with an expensive suit, and suddenly people are leaning forward, eager to listen, assuming authority, intelligence, or wealth. It has nothing to do with actual ability or character. It has everything to do with the image that people choose to attach to you in that first instant. That is why perception becomes a battlefield where the underestimated often fight silently, waiting for the right moment to prove themselves. For someone who is underestimated, the burden of perception can feel heavy. It is not just about being ignored. It's about being defined by others in ways that strip away dignity. Think of the countless times people have looked at someone's background, their skin color, their accent, or their job title, and instantly decided who they must be. Without speaking, without asking, without learning, they have already written the story. And in that story, the individual is painted as powerless, insignificant, and irrelevant. That perception becomes a cage, trapping them in a false narrative they never agreed to live inside. Yet within this lies a hidden strength. When others underestimate you, they expose their blind spots. They reveal how narrow their vision truly is. Because the moment they decide you have no power, they stop paying attention. They lower their guard. They dismiss your presence. And in doing so, they give you an advantage, the element of surprise. The underestimated person can move in silence, strategize without being noticed, and prepare without interference. When the moment finally comes to reveal who they really are, the shock is magnified because it goes against everything perception had built up. That single revelation becomes powerful not just because of what it is, but because it tears apart the false belief that existed before it. This is why perception is not just about how others see you. It is about how you use that perception to your benefit. If people think you are powerless, they will never expect the strength you hold within. If they assume you have no influence, they will never prepare for the connections you may carry. If they decide you have no voice, they will never be ready for the moment you speak and command the room. What others see as weakness can become the exact disguise that protects your greatest strength until it is time to reveal it. And perception doesn't only shape how others see you. It also tries to shape how you see yourself. The danger lies in believing the false narrative created by others. Too many people allow the weight of negative perception to crush their confidence. They begin to accept the idea that they are powerless because that is how the world treats them. But true power is not in how others define you. It is in how you define yourself in the face of those definitions. The underestimated must learn to carry themselves with the knowledge of their own worth, even when nobody else recognizes it. That quiet self-assurance is the seed of transformation, because it ensures that when the right moment arrives, they are ready to show the world the truth. Perception can never fully contain reality. It can distort it, it can delay it, but it can never erase it. The truth always has a way of breaking through, often at the moment when it is least expected. And when that happens, the same people who once dismissed you are forced to confront their own blindness. Their shock becomes your validation, not because you needed their approval, but because their disbelief highlights how wrong they truly were. Why silence is often misread comes down to the way people interpret what they do not understand. In a world that constantly rewards loudness, confidence, and visible dominance, silence is frequently mistaken as weakness. When someone chooses not to speak, others quickly assume it is because they cannot speak, because they lack knowledge, or because they are too timid to step forward. This interpretation could not be further from the truth in many cases, Yet it persists because human beings often equate noise with power and quietness with powerlessness. What people fail to realize is that silence itself is a strategy, a form of control, and a way of observing the world more deeply than those who are busy filling the air with words. When someone is silent in a room full of voices, they are not absent. They are listening. They are studying every tone, every expression, every contradiction that slips between the sentences of others. They are gathering information while the rest are busy exposing themselves. Silence becomes a shield that protects them from judgment and a window that opens into the hidden layers of the people around them. Those who speak endlessly may feel they hold the power, but in reality, they are giving away their thoughts, their weaknesses, and their strategies without realizing it. Meanwhile, the silent observer takes in everything, storing it for the moment it will be needed most. The misinterpretation of silence often says more about the observer than the silent person themselves. People who are uncomfortable with stillness feel threatened when others do not match their energy. They project weakness onto the quiet individual because they themselves cannot understand restraint. If they were silent, they might feel invisible, so they assume everyone must feel the same way. But for the silent individual, the lack of words is not a void. It is a canvas where thoughts, insights, and strategies are quietly painted. The mistake lies in thinking that silence is empty when in reality it is full of meaning. Throughout history, the most underestimated figures were often the quietest ones in the room. Their silence led others to overlook them, to dismiss them as irrelevant or incapable. Yet when they finally chose to speak, when they finally made a single move, the impact was magnified precisely because it was unexpected. The world notices loud voices every day, but it rarely forgets the rare voice that breaks silence with undeniable clarity. That is why silence can be more powerful than constant noise. It builds anticipation without anyone realizing it. And when it is finally broken, it shifts the entire atmosphere. Silence is also misread because people confuse it with consent or agreement. They believe that if someone does not object, they must be in support. If someone does not argue, they must not have the strength to fight back. This is a dangerous assumption because silence is rarely about surrender. It is often about patience. The silent individual allows others to reveal themselves, to speak freely, to underestimate them further. And in that patience lies an unseen advantage, because when the moment comes to act, it is not fueled by impulse but by careful calculation. Another layer of misunderstanding comes from the belief that silence equals ignorance. People assume that if someone truly knew something, they would speak up to prove it. But the truly wise understand that knowledge is not a performance. Knowledge is strength that does not always need to be broadcast. Speaking at every chance can dilute authority, but speaking sparingly ensures that when you do speak, people listen more intently. Silence is not the absence of knowledge. It is the discipline of choosing when and how to use it. Those who misread silence also reveal their own impatience. They demand reactions, they crave validation, they want immediate responses. When someone does not give them that, they assume the person is lost or incapable. But the silent individual is not reacting on command. They are controlling the rhythm of interaction. By withholding words, they force others to reveal themselves more and more. They create a discomfort that makes others talk faster, expose more than intended, or even underestimate the silent one further. This quiet control is invisible power, hidden in plain sight, waiting for its moment to reshape perception entirely. In this way, silence is not weakness, nor is it absence. It is presence in its purest form, a statement without sound, a refusal to be rushed or defined by others. It unsettles those who cannot read it, and it empowers those who understand how to use it. The misreading of silence is one of the greatest mistakes people make when judging others, and it is also one of the greatest opportunities for those who are patient enough to let silence work in their favor. One bold move changes everything because life is rarely shifted by small, unnoticed gestures, but by moments that cut through the noise and demand attention. When someone is underestimated, society expects them to remain in the background, quiet, compliant, and powerless. But the moment they decide to step out of that role, even once, the narrative that was built against them begins to collapse. One call, one decision, One act of courage can undo years of false perception and force the world to see the truth. That is the power of boldness. It does not require constant repetition. It requires timing, precision, and the willingness to act when everyone least expects it. The underestimated individual lives under the shadow of doubt, and this doubt works like a cage, keeping them confined to assumptions placed on them by others. Every day they carry the weight of being overlooked, dismissed, or seen as irrelevant. Most people who are underestimated stay within the lines that others draw for them, partly because breaking free feels risky and partly because the world has convinced them that silence is safer. But there comes a point when patience transforms into decision, and that single decision has the power to change everything. A bold move is not just action, it is the rejection of the cage itself. What makes a bold move so transformative is that it cannot be ignored. When someone who has been dismissed suddenly reveals their strength, it shocks those around them into silence. The bold act becomes a mirror that exposes the blindness of everyone who underestimated them. It interrupts the story that others tried to write about them and forces the creation of a new one. And once that boldness is revealed, it cannot be unseen. The perception of weakness begins to fade, not because the person has changed, but because they finally revealed what was always there. Boldness carries weight because it often requires risk. To make a move when everyone expects you to stay still means stepping into uncertainty. There is always the possibility of failure, always the fear of judgment, always the chance that the act might backfire. Yet this is what gives boldness its strength. When someone dares to act despite the risk, they demonstrate courage that many others never find within themselves. That courage becomes undeniable proof that the underestimated are not powerless. They are simply waiting for the right moment to show their strength. Consider how one decision can alter the trajectory of a life. A person who has been silent in meetings finally speaks up with an idea that changes the direction of an entire project. A student who has been mocked for being quiet raises their voice in defense of truth, silencing the bullies instantly. A man seen as powerless makes a single phone call that reveals connections nobody thought he had, shaking the foundation of every assumption around him. These examples show that boldness does not need to be constant to be effective. It needs to be timely, unexpected, and undeniable. Another reason one bold move changes everything is because it creates a ripple effect. People who once doubted begin to question themselves. Those who mocked begin to stay silent. Those who ignored begin to pay attention. The underestimated individual becomes impossible to dismiss because boldness has forced the world to see what it chose not to see before. And this ripple extends beyond others. It transforms the individual as well. The moment they step into boldness, they realize their own capacity for strength. They begin to see themselves not as powerless, but as powerful. That single move does not just change the way others perceive them, it changes the way they perceive themselves. Boldness is also memorable. In a world filled with endless words and actions, most are forgotten within days or hours. But a bold act, especially when it comes from someone least expected, leaves an imprint that lingers. People may not remember every detail, but they will never forget the shock of realizing they were wrong about someone. That memory reshapes how they view the person forever. It becomes a turning point in the story, a moment that divides before and after. Before, they were underestimated. After, they were recognized. The underestimated often know that they may not get many chances to prove themselves, which is why boldness matters so much. They understand that the world is not waiting to give them opportunities freely. They must create those opportunities themselves. One calculated, daring move can open doors that years of silent endurance never could. It can ignite respect, force recognition, and dismantle stereotypes all at once. This is why boldness is feared by those in power, because when the overlooked rise with courage, they challenge the very structure that was built to keep them down. Influence hidden in plain sight is one of the most underestimated forms of power because it is subtle, quiet, and often invisible until the moment it is revealed. People are trained to look for obvious displays of strength, loud voices, expensive clothes, visible authority, and public recognition. They assume that influence must always shine brightly, that it must announce itself to the world in order to exist. Yet the most powerful influence often works silently, unnoticed by those who believe they hold control. It is the unseen network, the quiet respect, the unspoken trust that surrounds a person without others even realizing it. This type of influence lives in the background, waiting for the right moment to step forward, and when it does, it completely shifts the balance of power. The underestimated individual often carries influence in ways that outsiders cannot recognize. It might be through relationships built quietly over years, through credibility that others take for granted, or through a reputation that stretches beyond the room they are standing in. Just because someone does not flaunt their power does not mean they do not have it. In fact, the absence of obvious display often makes that power even stronger because it comes without warning. Those who think they are looking at a powerless person are shocked when they discover the unseen threads of influence woven all around them. Hidden influence is powerful because it is underestimated. People dismiss what they cannot see, believing that if something is not visible, it must not exist. But hidden influence thrives on this blindness. It allows someone to walk through spaces without being measured as a threat, without being scrutinized, and without being resisted. This invisibility provides freedom to observe, to gather, and to prepare. Then, when the moment of revelation comes, the impact is greater because nobody saw it coming. The shock of realizing that someone had influence all along transforms perception instantly, because it dismantles the false image of powerlessness that others built. What makes influence hidden in plain sight so effective is the quiet trust it creates. Loud authority often depends on fear or position, but hidden influence is born from genuine relationships and earned respect. People may underestimate someone because of how they look or where they sit, but behind the scenes, that person might have allies, supporters, and connections that reach far deeper than anyone realizes. This type of influence cannot be stolen or faked because it is not based on appearance. It is based on substance. It grows in silence, and by the time others recognize it, it is already too strong to ignore. Consider how often hidden influence reveals itself in small but decisive ways. A single word from someone who was dismissed as irrelevant can suddenly shift the direction of a conversation because people in the room secretly value their perspective. A phone call made by someone assumed to be powerless can open doors that even the most confident voices could not unlock. A quiet figure in the background can turn out to be the one person everyone respects when decisions must be made. These moments happen because influence does not always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears humility, patience, and silence, yet it carries more weight than the loudest authority. The danger of ignoring hidden influence lies in the arrogance of assuming you see everything. People who think they have full control often expose themselves because they do not account for what lies unseen. They underestimate the quiet person, only to find out that the quiet person is connected to someone they cannot challenge, or that the respect surrounding them runs deeper than appearances suggested. This sudden revelation can turn the tables instantly. The powerless image shatters, and in its place stands someone whose influence was always there, waiting beneath the surface. Hidden influence also teaches a deeper truth about power, that it is not always about being seen, but about being felt. A person may not take the spotlight, yet their presence shapes decisions, guides actions, and shifts outcomes without ever being directly acknowledged. The room may not realize it at the time, but the undercurrent of influence is there, steering the course silently. Later, when the results unfold, people finally recognize that the individual they overlooked was the one holding the strings all along. For the underestimated, influence hidden in plain sight is their greatest weapon. It allows them to move without drawing resistance, to plan without being interrupted, and to rise without being stopped. It is the strength that others overlook, the authority that does not need to be broadcast, and the truth that cannot be denied once it finally comes into the light. Turning doubt into respect is one of the most powerful transformations a person can experience, especially for someone who has been underestimated their entire life. Doubt is something that clings tightly to those whom society chooses to overlook. It is the skeptical glance, the whispered question, the unspoken assumption that someone does not have what it takes. From the way people speak to you, to the way they dismiss your presence, doubt is a constant shadow that follows the underestimated. Yet within that shadow lies an opportunity, because doubt, when faced with undeniable truth, does not just fade away. It flips into respect so quickly that it leaves people speechless. Doubt is rooted in perception, and perception, as powerful as it may seem, is fragile. People doubt others based on appearances, status, background, or silence. They look at someone and decide they cannot lead, cannot influence, cannot succeed. This doubt is rarely based on real evidence. It is based on prejudice, assumptions, and shallow observation. That is why doubt is so dangerous and so limiting, because it prevents others from seeing the full depth of someone's ability. But that same fragility is what makes doubt transform so easily into respect. The very moment the underestimated reveals their strength, the entire structure of doubt crumbles, and what replaces it is not just acknowledgement. It is often admiration. Respect that is born from doubt carries more weight than respect that was given freely. When someone who doubted you is forced to admit they were wrong, their respect comes with a sense of humility. They have to face the fact that they misjudged you, that they dismissed you unfairly, that they failed to see what was always there. This creates a deeper respect because it is not based on convenience or habit, it is based on revelation. It is the kind of respect that sticks, because the shock of being proven wrong makes the memory unforgettable. The journey from doubt to respect is often triggered by one decisive action. A quiet individual who has been overlooked suddenly speaks with clarity and authority, silencing the room. Someone labeled powerless makes a bold move that changes the course of events. Someone assumed to be irrelevant reveals connections or knowledge that nobody expected. These moments are not just acts of strength. They are turning points that force people to reframe everything they thought they knew. The underestimated individual becomes someone new in their eyes, not because they have changed, but because the truth has finally been revealed. What makes this transformation so profound is that it shifts not only how others see the person, but also how the person sees themselves. Living under constant doubt can wear down even the strongest spirit. It can make someone question their own value, wonder if they are truly as powerless as others believe, and second-guess their every move. But when doubt finally flips into respect, it validates the truth they always carried within. It reminds them that their worth was never defined by others' blindness, but by their own abilities, which simply had to be revealed at the right time. This internal shift becomes a source of renewed confidence, making them walk taller, speak with more certainty, and embrace their identity with strength. The underestimated often understand that respect earned through this journey is unshakable. Unlike respect given casually, this kind of respect cannot be taken back. Once people see the truth, they cannot unsee it. The individual they once doubted has now become someone they look to, someone they listen to, someone they acknowledge. And because the respect was born from a reversal of doubt, it carries a sharper edge. It is respect backed by the memory of underestimation, respect that feels almost like a debt. This transformation also creates a ripple effect. When one person flips their doubt into respect, others quickly follow. Doubt often spreads like a rumor, but respect spreads like wildfire once it is proven. The underestimated individual, who once stood in the shadows of dismissal, suddenly finds themselves at the center of attention. People who ignored them now seek their presence. People who question them now echo their words. The tables turn, and the very doubt that once weighed them down becomes the fuel that lifts them up. Turning doubt into respect is not just about proving others wrong. It is about reclaiming control of the story. It shows that doubt is not permanent, that being underestimated is not a life sentence. It reveals that strength does not always need to fight back immediately. Sometimes it waits, silently, until the perfect moment arrives to make its presence undeniable. When that moment comes, the same voices that once questioned you fall silent, replaced by words of admiration and acknowledgement. The journey from doubt to respect is the ultimate reversal, a reminder that nothing is more powerful than truth finally being recognized. Lessons in never underestimating anyone begin with the simple truth that appearances rarely tell the whole story. Human beings are quick to judge, quick to categorize, and quick to decide who matters and who does not. They rely on surface-level signals, clothing, titles, speech, or status, to make instant assumptions about a person's worth. But history, experience, and everyday life continue to reveal that the people most dismissed often carry the greatest potential to surprise. The danger of underestimating others lies not just in the harm it does to them, but in the blindness it creates in those who judge. Every time someone writes off another person, they close the door to discovering the strength, wisdom, and influence that person may hold. The first lesson is that strength often hides where nobody expects it. Some people do not broadcast their power because they do not need to. They walk with humility. They listen more than they speak, and they allow others to underestimate them without protest. But humility should never be confused with weakness. Many of the strongest individuals are the ones who choose restraint over showmanship, silence over noise, and patience over haste. To underestimate such individuals is to miss the quiet resilience that builds within them, a resilience that often proves more enduring than any loud display of authority. The second lesson is that opportunity often belongs to the underestimated. Because people dismiss them, they are given the freedom to move unnoticed. They can prepare, observe, and plan without drawing suspicion. Others reveal their thoughts openly, assuming the quiet person is irrelevant, not realizing that the underestimated one is collecting information that will later turn the tables. This hidden advantage only exists because of underestimation. By the time the underestimated individual reveals their true power, they have already gained a head start, and those who misjudge them are left unprepared. Another lesson is that underestimating others often exposes the arrogance of the one doing the judging. When someone believes they can accurately measure another person's worth at a glance, they reveal their own narrowness. They show that they rely on stereotypes instead of curiosity, assumption instead of understanding. This arrogance becomes their downfall when reality forces them to admit they were wrong. The underestimated individual does not need to shout or argue. Their actions alone dismantle the false judgment. The moment they prove themselves, the arrogance of the doubter collapses, leaving them with no defense but silence. A further lesson comes from the fact that every person carries a story unseen by others. To underestimate someone is to ignore the battles they have fought, the lessons they have learned, and the experiences that have shaped them. People may look ordinary on the outside, but within them may exist years of hardship that have built unshakable resilience. They may carry knowledge that cannot be measured by appearance. They may hold connections that remain invisible until the right moment. To dismiss someone without understanding their story is to risk being blindsided when that hidden depth finally emerges. The underestimated also teach the lesson of patience. Many people feel the need to constantly prove themselves, but those who are underestimated often realize that patience is their greatest ally. They do not need to rush to show the world who they are. They wait, they endure, and they allow others to build their own false perceptions. Then, at the right time, they reveal themselves fully, and the contrast between expectation and reality magnifies their strength. This patience is not weakness. It is wisdom that comes from understanding the power of timing. Perhaps the most important lesson is that underestimating others limits not only them, but also the one who judges. Every time someone writes off another, they close the door to learning, collaboration, and discovery. They deny themselves the chance to see brilliance in unexpected places. They rob themselves of the humility that comes from recognizing that greatness does not always wear a label or announce itself loudly. The underestimated carry lessons the world desperately needs, but those lessons can only be seen by those who choose not to judge too quickly. These lessons remind us that the act of underestimating is never harmless. It shapes how people are treated, it dictates opportunities, and it blinds the world to hidden potential. But those who live underestimated learn how to carry strength quietly, how to turn patience into power, and how to transform disbelief into undeniable truth. They remind us, over and over, that the most dangerous mistake anyone can make is to assume they already know the limits of another person's worth.